Well, everyone, bad things can happen to good games, and this is one of those days. Monster Hunter Wilds has broken records, like seriously, it's become Capcom's fastest selling game ever. It had Steam concurrents of 1.3 million, which is insane, and an estimated 8 million copies sold in just 3 days. That is absolutely cracked. And right now, it's the 5th highest player count on Steam ever, which is a massive victory that should have investors and players and everybody celebrating. But it's not really like that in PC. The PC version has been teetering at, well, the 50s in terms of its review score. Thousands of people are calling it unplayable because of devastating performance issues, ones backed up by the likes of Digital Foundry. But when you filter by language, well, you find that actually Chinese-speaking reviews are utterly scathing compared to English-speaking reviews, and it's not even close. So the whole story's odd, but it's not odd in one sense. The reason why is fairly interesting, but most important and looming over all of this is that Capcom appear to have calculated this in advance and decided that all of this chaos was an acceptable cost of doing business. And if you look at their sales numbers, they are right. It's not like this bombed on Steam. It is peaking on Steam. But what if I told you that Capcom rushed PC because they found themselves 3/4 into the fiscal year, but only just over halfway to their revenue target, meaning that to hit targets and, well, for the people who run the show to please the people who they ultimately are accountable to, something bad had to happen, something had to give. Monster Hunter World hit PC 6 months after console. Rise hit PC 9 months after Switch. Wilds, though, as we learn here, well, it did not have that luxury. What this could and should have been is the absolute validation of Capcom's big strategy that they've rolled over the last while. Sadly, though, it is that, but only on paper. Now, as a game, this is perfectly capitalizing on, well, player interest in deep, systems-driven co-op experiences. It's doing that perfectly, and they really have pushed a 20-year-old niche franchise off the Nintendo 3DS and into the mainstream on consoles. Critics love it, sales are astronomical. There are a few design choices that are clearly aimed at their newer market, like the kind of walk and talk style PlayStation AAA sequences that some people don't love, but what you find is most of the gameplay complaints evaporate once people hit high rank endgame. That basically shows us that as Monster Hunter, this is goddamn incredible. But what does not evaporate are the technical disasters, and they truly are disasters. While console versions run relatively smoothly, PC is a technical catastrophe. Digital Foundry didn't mince their words. Monster Hunter Wilds, we can't recommend the PC version. Substantial technical problems must be addressed. When I say must, they really do mean it. These are bad. They warn against you playing on anything that's got less than 8 gigs of VRAM. They note the DLSS is ineffective, which is kind of concerning, right? It points at some of the underlying problems, and they even express shock at the hardware requirements for even baseline performance. This should not be the way that it is. People are reporting texture pop-ins, disastrous frame rates, crashes constantly, multiplayer failures, and progression blocking bugs. I mean, at least we've got a few hilarious screenshots from it, and in a way, you could look at all of that and think, there's another Capcom game, Dragon's Dogma 2, that had a lot of problems in PC, and that does raise serious questions about RE Engine's capability to handle open worlds. Now, for Dragon's Dogma 2, the devs eventually found that NPCs were bottlenecking, like the CPU side of things, majorly in town areas. That was just like a root problem in that game. With Wilds, it does seem the issues are more complex. There are theories everywhere, of course. Those range from a botched direct storage implementation to a really simple, funny one of a misspelled config file. Fixing the config file does not make all the problems go away, sadly. Those are theories. Right now, we do not rock solid know exactly what the problems are, but it's clear that there are problems. And what makes this real frustrating is comparison. Look at the relatively smooth launches of, say, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. There are other big, gorgeous-looking games on PC that have had good launches. And Capcom's only response has just been generic advice like, check your system's requirements and update your drivers, which is not reassuring to people who have spent $70 on a game that I would go as far as saying is unplayable. Some of that's the quality of the software, some of that is my own standards, but fuck it, I wouldn't play that. Now, it's worth mentioning the other sort of modern Capcom special here. There are some stupid microtransactions. I mean, hey, like at least part of the Capcom formula is also banger video games, right? So thumbs up for that, but it's got the usual. There's a torrent of day one microtransaction cosmetic things. There's a cosmetic bundle that contains all of those, plus the promise of future ones. And worst of all, there's a character and Palico edit voucher thing going on. They're sold in packs of 3 at $6 each after your first one, which doesn't really feel good. And the edit vouchers deserve special attention here. I mean, it's weird, they're edit vouchers that just cost nearly 10% of the base game, but as noted by VGC, they were not available during the review period, and that conveniently prevented critics from factoring those into their review scores. Even though I like Capcom, I really like what they're doing with their games, but that is scummy. So by now you understand, right, that there are problems here, but they're problems that are in an otherwise stellar game. We're going to have to talk about the money and why this has happened, but first, we've got the curious case of the reviews being truly strange. Looking deeper into the Steam reviews reveals something fascinating that I didn't expect. On Friday morning after launch, English language reviews were actually 64% positive. If you just looked at the Steam page, you wouldn't have thought that. Those climbed to 67% by Monday, which is not stellar. You need 70% plus for a positive rating, but hey, it is far better than the overall score the game had at that time. And across most regions, the reviews fluctuated between 65% and 80% positivity by Monday. So why is the average so low? China. Yeah, it's China. Chinese language reviews started at a brutal 11% positivity. They only reached 24% positivity by Monday. And this actually matters a lot because, in case you haven't noticed, China's rather large, and Chinese reviews make up roughly 40% of total reviews for this game in Steam. The Chinese gaming market is predominantly PC-focused because they didn't really have consoles for a long time, and they're just real unforgiving of bad PC performance. They really do seem to be. Now, you could perhaps say that Western players who are more emotionally attached to this brand are just more forgiving, right? So many people in the West will have played this on their 3DS, because again, Monster Hunter was more of a console thing, and console penetration into China is basically just recent. China really is ingrained on mobile phones and PC. So with China, it basically seems you've got an absolutely humongous gaming audience, a humongous audience in Steam, right? They are very PC focused. They don't have a lot of brand affinity with Monster Hunter. They probably are aware of just how massively hyped up it is because of course they can't access the other Monster Hunter games in Steam, which means that they play this at launch and basically go, what the hell is happening? And they leave a negative review. So a fairly interesting quirk, I suppose, of how games have developed across different regions, but in no way is this a surprise. And so with this first mystery, a rather pedestrian one, solved, I think we've got to talk about the second mystery, because you're probably looking at all of this, looking at the funny screenshots and thinking, there's no way that Capcom didn't know this would happen. I mean, there are problems on basically every PC. It's not a rare issue. So why did Capcom not delay this game to fix it? Because they've had other delayed releases for Monster Hunter games on PC. Well, the answer is money. Last quarter, Capcom saw a 33% drop in income and a 16% drop in net sales year on year because they had a lack of major releases. Now here's the spicy bit. Their forecast projects 165 billion yen in net sales this year. That's of course this financial year. But as of December 31st, they'd only made 88.5 billion. Now, you don't really need to be a mathematician to know that one of those numbers is a lot smaller than the other number. They are 3 quarters into the year, but only halfway to their revenue target. Many people would say this is a problem. Q4, the quarter that we're in now, has got to generate almost as much as the previous 3 quarters combined. And outside of live service stuff, Wilds is their only big release. It's their only option. So, unlike Monster Hunter World, which released on PC 6 months after consoles, Capcom basically could not afford to stagger the release, because even with the popularity of Wilds on consoles, they know PC is big, PC only seems to be getting bigger, and a PC release was likely needed to guarantee their sales target, because if they missed sales targets, even though their big marquee game Monster Hunter sold well on consoles, that would probably spook the market. So, it came out when it came out, with a whole month worth of sales to let them sail past 165 billion yen. That is likely a major part of why Wilds did not get the PC time that it as a game deserves and that us as customers deserve. The other part of the puzzle is that to Capcom, they don't need to fix if they can mitigate. So, PS5 Pro, PS5, Series X, Series S. That is 4 hardware targets. PC is obviously exponentially more complex. I mean, even just the problems the game devs have had with, Intel CPUs and drivers. Hasn't that been fun? Getting it right then in PC would have taken time that they did not have. That meant that Capcom only had one option, a strategy of mitigation. Well, there's the option of a delay, but as I've just covered, that's obviously not what was going to happen. So what they did is they ran 2 full PC betas to identify the worst problems, they launched a benchmark tool to sort of warn off players on weaker machines, and they just relied on their fan base's willingness to look past issues. And certainly if you compare the English and Chinese language reviews and you sort of think, well, the English speakers are probably going to be the more core Monster Hunter people, yeah, I suppose it kind of did work. I mean, from where I'm sitting, it did work. They've got a lot of sales. And it has worked before. I mean, Dragon's Dogma 2 sold 3 million units. It was considered a real big success for Capcom. More tellingly, though, Monster Hunter World sold 5 million copies just on the last-gen consoles. It then rose to 10 million after its delayed PC release. And it's not like its release was great. It launched to sub 50% user reviews as well. Which kind of means if you're Capcom, you look at all of this and you think, bad release, Steam reviews, not a problem for us. We've got Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter is more powerful than a spooky red bit of lettering on Steam. And thus far, Wild is performing better than World in both reviews and sales. And that means that hitting the shared release date at the expense of further PC optimization, I would say basic PC optimization, product speaking, well, that's actually worked. And as we've seen with, say, Elden Ring, Stalker, now Monster Hunter, audiences are willing to forgive performance issues for franchises they're emotionally attached to, at least as much as this one, and as long as there's an expectation that improvement is possible. And I suppose with World, there is evidence of that. And all this brings me to a DJ Khaled album. Suffering from success, that's what's happening to PC. PC is becoming more important, but it almost seems that ports are getting worse these days, which kind of seems insane, but I can see why. If PC is more important to the bottom line, then delaying in PC will hurt more. And unlike consoles, PC, well, it is genuinely a harder problem in terms of optimization and launches than consoles are, right? That's a genuine challenge. And if there's one thing that our industry historically and currently sucks at, it's giving engineers the time they need to actually do shit right. So you would think the importance of PC would increase the value of the PC port being good. In a way it does, but in reality, we're seeing companies simply not think that the damage of a rough launch is worth the delay if their franchise is strong. And at the end of the day, it's all down to the numbers, it's all down to incentives. But not really in the way you'd first think, so let me explain. A smaller publisher or an indie dev might rush out a game because they're incentivized by actually getting some money so they don't literally go bust. But a giant, publicly traded AAA could delay. They can tank that hit, but so often they don't, and game releases feel rushed. And that's because the C-suite decision makers are working on their own incentives to keep investors happy. That's actually what you're doing if you're in the C-suite. And I mean, even the performance compensation of C-suite people, well, that can often be tied to stock price. And that should align their interests with the company and the value it produces, but so often it doesn't. It aligns their value with the short-term, not long-term value. And that's not because good games are bad business. It's because the market itself is a game with its own rules, its own norms, its own incentives. And when the bigwigs are playing that game, the upshot is damage to our games, and that has just happened to Monster Hunter. Time and time again, we see this. And in the case of Riot Games, well, they're 100% owned by Tencent. Tencent has still got to play to the market, and it's pretty damn clear that things are not all great at Riot. They've literally said that, well, League of Legends is unsustainable. And while they did walk back changes, it's still a spicy situation. Worse will follow, and you can learn about that in our next story.